Bilinguals of Reddit, what's your "they didn't know I spoke their language" story? Late to the party, but once when I was younger, I went to the park with my sister. We looked very white, and no one would know both of us spoke Mandarin fluently unless we told them. Some money must have fallen out of my sister's pocket, and in Mandarin we hear the mother talking to her daughter and telling her not to let us know we dropped money so that they could pick it up after we left. Both of us turned around straight away, and my sister picked up her money, while both of us gave them dirty looks, and we changed our conversation to Mandarin. The look of horror on both of their faces will forever be burned into my head. Visiting South Korea with my wife, a native of that country. I'm shaped like a lumberjack and have a big, red lumberjack beard to match. A group of Korean women in their 50s and 60s nearby were laughing and calling me a bear, which I found hilarious. So one of the older ones says, "Gom bear," to me as she passes by, and I start laughing. She makes that face like, did he understand what I just said? So I raise my arms and make a playful growl at her. She is horrified and starts apologizing while her friends all cover their mouths and giggle, as Korean women customarily do. I love Korea. I'm a white guy who lived in Senegal for 11 years. As such, I learned quite a bit of Wolof, the local language. 99% of white people here don't, because they aren't there that long. Anyways, there were a few times that people were talking about me or to me in Wolof without knowing I understood them. Once there was a group of teens at the beach and one of them greeted me with a Wolof insult for white people, red ears, but he said it in a nice way, as if I wouldn't know he was insulting me. He kept talking to me in Wolof and I responded in French that I don't understand, while in actuality I understood very well. After a minute, I had enough and said in Wolof, "Okay, I'm going, I'll see you around, black ears." His friends had a big laugh and I moved on. I worked as a part-time clothing model for a while in an Arab country. I am Arab, but I don't look like it apparently. Anyways, we had to walk around this convention and show the clothes, wearing heels on a carpet floor. I was young, around 16. I didn't know how to walk really well in heels yet, and the carpet floors didn't help either. The women there didn't know I spoke Arabic and started making fun of how I'm walking. I went up to them and asked them where the bathroom was in Arabic. They looked so surprised and embarrassed at the same time. It was lovely. Sometimes, not being aggressive is the best comeback. I used to work as a dealer in a casino where our biggest, richest clients were Chinese. I don't look Chinese, but I could understand and speak it. Sitting down on my table, they thought it was safe to discuss techniques to be sneaky behind my back and also talk about me a little. I'm a young girl, so I got some creepy remarks. They never understood how they never got away with things, as I never made any indication I understood them. Teacher here had a student with serious issues concerning authority. Essentially, he would cuss out nearly anyone who tried to tell him what to do with every name in the book. One day, he thought he'd get creative and starting swearing in Spanish to avoid consequences and called me basically the equivalent of a wrinkly ball sack. Long story short, I would pay to have a picture of his face when I replied, in fluent Spanish, that he was going to call his mother and repeat what he had just said. I'm Chinese, but I also speak English and Spanish, and if this kid really thought Spanish was a good choice of obscure language others wouldn't understand, wow, he's lacking some common sense el mal. Mandarin, English, and Spanish are quite possibly the worst choices if you are trying to say something without others understanding. In Quebec, on a ski trip, a bus hit my dad's car while trying to park. My dad got onto the bus and started talking to the driver. The driver was quite apologetic, but when my dad started asking for his insurance information, he all of a sudden couldn't speak English. Without skipping a beat, Dad switches to interrogating the driver in French, the language he did all of his education until university. Driver was shook. I went on a short trip to Salzburg, Austria. I'm from Hungary. This winter, shortly before Christmas, I was walking through a crowded area in the Christmas market. Everyone speaking in German, when I heard the guy right next to me yell, "Who put their hands in my ass?" in Hungarian quite loudly. I started to laugh as loud as I can, and the guy's face was all red. He was so embarrassed. So, I was living in Barcelona dating a Swedish girl about 10 years ago, and I got really into studying Swedish and watching Swedish films and learning vocabulary and stuff. So we went on vacation to Portugal with her roommate over the summer, and we're on the beach. I'm listening to a conversation that they're having between themselves, and honestly, not understanding much of it. But then, in this moment of pure clarity, I heard my girlfriend say, "Sometimes I look at him and I just think, why?" Oh man, I confronted her about it, and I've never seen someone turn so red in my life. I look mixed. I'm full Cambodian, but I've been confused with being mixed with black. When I was 7, I went with my mom to her doctor in Long Beach, which is mainly Cambodian populated in that area. My mom went inside her doctor's office, leaving me in the waiting room. As soon as the office door closed, these two old Cambodian ladies start talking shit in Khmer, saying how she's a single mom, she's not, and how she had a black baby, me, and that's such a shame because she made my life miserable. They also said my skin color was ugly and I had a black nose, etc. I just sat quietly, looking at them until one realized, oh snap, maybe she understands Khmer, and asked me, hey, do you know your dad? And I just replied back in our language, yeah, and he's at home waiting for us. And we have the same skin color, so that means yours is ugly too. Both of their faces dropped. It was great, and they had the audacity to tell my mom that I was rude when she came out. I wasn't the bilingual one, but my bilingual friend was really the star of the show. I am a straight guy, and my bilingual friend is gay. We were in college for summer school 20 years ago, and everyone taking classes stayed in the same old dormitory. It was a school with a lot of international students who had even greater representation in the summer because they typically didn't fly home for just 3 months. My friend had a computer, I didn't, so he told me I could go into his room anytime and use it if he didn't need it at the time. My friend was white but had spent a number of his childhood years in Japan and spoke Japanese like a native. We were talking and walking down the hall toward his room, and 2 Japanese exchange students began talking to one another in Japanese, looking at us and snickering. My friend looks over and starts dressing them down in absolute perfect Japanese, and they are horrifically embarrassed. They began profusely apologizing and hurriedly waking away. I turned to my buddy. What did they say? They were making some disparaging remarks about your sex life, so I told them they were wrong and not to be rude, he said. Then he quipped, they were making some disparaging remarks about my sex life too, but those were all true. Your friend seems like an absolutely wonderful person. I'm an American and English-German bilingual. My high school hosted some exchange students from Austria. My family hosted a student. We were the only German-speaking host family. None of the exchange students, except the one living in my house, knew I know German. Americans are notoriously bad at foreign language, so the Austrians assumed I was monolingual. Anyway, I was hanging out with some of the exchange students and other hosts, and one of the Austrian kids told a joke to the other Austrians in German. I laughed. He asked, why are you laughing? You're just laughing because we're laughing? My exchange student said, no, she knows German. Yes, I understand everything, I confirmed. Oh shit, now we can't trash talk the Americans anymore. This happened in high school. My homeroom teacher sent me to the principal's office with some paperwork that was requested. As I walk in, I see this one guy in the principal's office, tall black dude, we'll call him Mr. J, and he is speaking fluent Spanish with the Spanish teacher. I drop off the papers with the secretary and go back to class. It's almost end of day, and I'm in my English class, and we have a substitute teacher, Mr. J. Well, kids being kids, no one is listening to him, and one of my classmates, Millie, who's sitting on the other side of the room from me, starts bad-mouthing him in Spanish to 3 other girls. I kept telling her to shut up, but she wouldn't listen and just went on and on. He heard me try to warn her and motioned for me to stop, so I stopped, and that's when he began talking back to her in Spanish. I didn't say a thing, and the whole class died laughing. Millie then began to yell at me for not warning her, and Mr. J told her, she tried to warn you, but you didn't listen. She and the other girls got detention for about a week. It's the reverse of this, actually. I didn't know they spoke my language. I asked my mom in Vietnamese if I could have the Mexican ice cream near checkout. That shit is the best thing ever, and was begging her since she thought I had too many sweets. This older white man turns around and says it's pretty good ice cream, in our language. Me and my mom blankly stared at him in awe. It was the first time I've ever heard a white man speak Vietnamese. It wasn't flawless, but I could understand him. It was actually pretty freaking great. He noticed our faces and was just like, yeah, my wife's family does the same. I'm fairly tattooed, and I was working in retail, in a shoe shop. I was serving a very rude woman and her daughter, both of whom clearly thought they were better than me, and every time they asked for shoes they told me, in English, that I was very slow to fetch them and bad at my job. I was only on like my 3rd shift. The atmosphere turned pretty sour because obviously they were being rude and it annoyed me, and as I was boxing up the shoes they wanted, the mother turned and said to her daughter something like, don't ever get tattoos, this is the kind of person that has them. Working in retail with absolutely no brains and tattoos reflect that. Blah blah blah, in Italian. I simply replied, I disagree, but thank you. She looked absolutely humiliated and quickly left. I live in the US. I'm first-generation Romanian American. Born here to immigrant parents, spoke Romanian at home, that sort of thing. Was out in public not too long ago, and an older couple started making rude comments about my outward physical appearance, specifically my tattoos and muscles. The look of fear when I turned around and responded to them was priceless. I don't really have that good of a story, but the faces were pretty funny. I studied abroad and got a minor in Spanish, so I can understand most spoken Spanish and definitely understand it when reading. I'm just very slow at speaking at this point since I'm so out of practice. A couple weeks ago at work, I was warming up my breakfast when I hear two women speaking to each other, in Spanish, that they needed to call maintenance because the coffee machine was broken. Without really thinking I said, but in English, it's not broken, it just needs a new filter. That's what the error message said, and they both just stared at me. Something similar happened at my house when I was having a pest control treatment done. Two of the workers were talking to each other in Spanish, and I heard them say, "I can't find the attic stairs." So I said, "Oh, they're right here." And then when I walked away, I heard them discussing if I spoke Spanish or not. I did usually keep that under wraps so I'd be able to hear what people were saying when working on my home. I like to know the truth, and a lot of times people thinking I don't speak their language is a good way to get that. I live in Texas, so 95% of day laborers will speak Spanish. It's handy to understand what's being said. Had a manager like that. His grandparents spoke only Spanish, but his parents wanted him to know English and wouldn't let him speak Spanish at home. If you asked him a question in Spanish, he'd understand but answer in English. Happens to me on the regular. I'm a white person with red hair and green eyes who lives in Japan and works as a translator. I fit the definition of ultra gaijin, so folks think they can just say whatever they want around me, especially since a lot of people subscribe to the silly stereotype that Japanese is just so hard and impossible for foreigners to learn. I remember when I was an exchange student in uni in Tokyo, I was going around a bunch of circles during club fair week to see what was worth joining. One was a conversation club for English, which really pushed foreigners to join and had people constantly smiling and promising friendships and lots of fun get-togethers. I didn't really know anyone in the uni, so I went to their first dinner get-together just so I could make friends. I joined a table with a really gangly white girl who didn't speak any Japanese, and the club senior at our table would compliment her and act super friendly, but then would turn to each other, still all smiles, talk shit about how freakish she looked, or how she smelled awful. I was speaking in English the whole night and sat right next to the girl. Towards the end, when they really started going off, I just turned to them and said, "Oh hey, so what you guys talking about?" in Japanese. The color completely drained from their faces. They just laughed awkwardly and stopped talking among each other for the rest of the night. I didn't tell the girl anything, but convinced her the club was lame, and we both ended up joining a dance group instead. I'm an Indian who is fluent in Mandarin and was at a local poker game where two Chinese lads were talking shit about me as I had won some money off of them. Lad A spoke to his pal in Mandarin, "Watch me wreck this noob by bluffing his arse off, and I'm gonna show him the bluff when he folds." It was a rather big pot for me, $1,000, as I was only 18 back then, and I put on a show for him with the size and massive tanking to get him to sweat it out before I made the call with a single pair to take the pot down. He was extremely frustrated and sarcastically told me that I made a next-level call. The game ended 2 hours later with me winning over $2,000, and he was the main contributor. It took every shred of discipline not to rub it in his face that I spoke Mandarin, as I wanted to shear this sheep over and over again, which I did over the next few months. Thanks, Mr. Whale. I was playing chess with some guy, and he was talking to a friend. My opponent starts talking to his friend in French, which I can understand. He was saying stuff like, "My opponent sucks, I'm gonna easily beat him." It was pretty amusing watching him criticize me, and then I still beat him. He was pretty bad, but so was I back then. I told him I understand French after I beat him. My opponent sucks. Yeah, mine too. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to press like button and subscribe. I really appreciate you guys. If you want to suggest interesting Reddit posts, drop them down in the comments. Till next time, peace.